The invisible supply cannot run out. It has no bottom. It has no ceiling. It is not governed by the economy, by the job market, by the decisions of one employer, or by the silence of one client. Wallace Wattles was precise about this. The formless substance from which all visible wealth is drawn is infinite in nature, boundless in capacity, and entirely indifferent to the limitations of the visible world. If it is truly infinite, then the supply itself is not the fragile part of the process. The supply has never been the fragile part. The danger is not that source fails. The danger is that the receiver collapses into fear. The danger is that you, standing in the middle of an infinite supply, disconnect from it, accuse it, and then interpret that disconnection as proof that the supply is gone. The invisible supply is not the problem. Something within the one who is meant to receive it has closed. And until that inner disconnection is identified, named, and corrected, the most abundant source in existence will appear to the disconnected mind as though it were empty. This teaching is about that pattern. And before this is finished, you will understand exactly how you have been cutting the cord yourself. You know this experience. You know what it feels like to watch a door close and feel the floor shift beneath you. A position ends. A contract is not renewed. A payment that was coming simply does not arrive. The account drops lower than you have allowed yourself to imagine, and then it drops further. The messages you sent out are met with silence. The opportunities that felt solid dissolve without warning, and you are left staring at a visible world that no longer shows you any clear path forward. In that moment, everything inside you begins to scream one sentence: supply has failed me. And what makes this pain so deep is that it does not feel like a practical problem alone. It feels like an abandonment. It feels like a spiritual betrayal. You prayed, you trusted, you believed that the source would provide, that the universe would respond, that the invisible would become visible in your life. And then the visible channel closed, and the silence that followed felt like a verdict. Not just a financial setback. A verdict about whether you are the kind of person who receives. A verdict about whether the source actually answers your particular prayers, or whether you have been alone in this the entire time. The bills arrive in silence. The calendar moves. The pressure does not lift. And somewhere in the accumulation of all those closed doors and delayed provisions and unreturned messages, a belief begins to harden inside you. The belief is this: I have been abandoned by the thing I trusted. The source, God, the universe, the invisible supply, whatever name you have used for the power that was supposed to provide, it has gone quiet. It has turned its face from me. And the fear that follows that belief is not small. It is the kind of fear that changes how you speak, how you move, how you sleep, and how you see every door that comes toward you. Wallace Wattles spent his life dismantling exactly that belief. He did not write as a theorist. He wrote as a man who had known poverty deeply and who had found through precise application of spiritual law that the formless substance underlying all visible reality is genuinely unlimited in its creative capacity. He taught that what you see in the visible world is always a current expression of an invisible source, and that the visible expression can change its form without the source itself diminishing by a single unit. The substance does not shrink when a channel closes. The ocean does not lose water because one river redirected its path. What Wattles understood, and what this teaching is built upon, is that human suffering around money is almost never caused by the failure of the source. It is caused by the receiver losing connection with the source while staring at the changing form of one particular channel. The man watching his employer's company contract does not realize that he is watching a channel shift, not a source fail. The woman whose client disappears is watching a delivery route close, not watching the reservoir empty. The error is in the identification. And when the identification is wrong, the response is wrong. And the wrong response deepens the disconnection until the very supply that was always available becomes, from the inside, completely invisible. Before this teaching is finished, you will understand the precise mechanism by which invisible supply operates. You will understand the difference between connection and disconnection, between the command that opens and the panic that closes. You will receive a practical protocol for returning to connection in the middle of visible difficulty, and you will understand the disconnection pattern, the exact pattern that makes infinite supply appear absent, even while it remains fully available, because that pattern is operating in millions of lives right now, and it may be operating in yours. The supply has not failed you, but something has interrupted the connection, and that something can be corrected beginning now. The visible world teaches one relentless lesson. It teaches that supply is located in channels, that wealth lives inside the job, that provision comes from the client list, that security is held in the account balance, that income is generated by the specific platform, the particular employer, the current contract, the one stream of work that has been flowing. The visible world is very persuasive about this. It builds its entire architecture around the idea that supply is housed in visible structures, and that when those structures weaken, supply itself is weakening. And so, the moment one of those visible channels begins to change, every trained reflex in the viewer says the same thing. My supply is going. Consider the specific sequence. The job begins to slow. There are fewer hours, fewer projects, fewer conversations that point toward security. The viewer watches this and does not say, one channel is shifting. The viewer says, I am losing my supply. The inner interpretation is not about a channel, it is about the source itself. The mind has collapsed the source into the channel so completely that any movement in the channel registers as a movement in the fundamental supply. And from that point forward, every decision is made from a person who believes they are watching their supply shrink, not a person who is watching a delivery route change its shape. Then the client leaves. It does not matter whether the relationship ended cleanly or with difficulty. What matters is that the mind, already trained to see supply as living inside channels, registers this departure as further confirmation. Supply is contracting, the source is pulling back, the invisible is withdrawing, and the viewer, without knowing it, has now constructed an internal case against the source using the movements of channels as the evidence. Not one shred of actual source has changed, but the inner verdict is being built from visible data alone. Then the account drops. And this is where the physical sensation of lack becomes overwhelming, because numbers on a screen are very convincing. They speak loudly. They feel like proof. The dropping account does not feel like a current level. It feels like a direction, like a trajectory, like evidence of where things are heading. And the mind that has already identified supply with channel now reads the dropping number as though it were watching the source itself drain away, as though the reservoir of invisible substance were tied directly to that particular balance on that particular screen. Then the bill arrives. Then another. And each bill that arrives in the silence of an account that is not replenishing feels like another confirmation. The visible world is building a case, and the mind is accepting it. The mind that was trained to see source inside the channel now sees each bill as a claim against a source that is failing. Not a claim against a channel that is shifting. A claim against the source, against God, against the universe, against the invisible supply that was supposed to be infinite. And the inner accusation begins to form. Then the door closes. The opportunity that seemed to be forming goes quiet. The conversation that felt promising simply stops moving forward, and by now, the viewer has enough visible evidence stacked in front of them that the conclusion feels not only reasonable but spiritually honest. The source has stopped providing. The invisible supply has run dry, at least for me, and this is where the trap completes itself, because it was never the source that changed. It was always a collection of channels shifting form. But from inside a mind trained to see supply only through visible channels, the closing of a door looks exactly like the source abandoning the room. The message does not come. The reply that was expected, the response that would have meant movement, the confirmation that would have meant provision, simply does not arrive. The inbox is quiet. The phone is still. And silence to a mind that has already accepted the false equation of channel and source is not experienced as a pause in communication between a human and a channel. It is experienced as the silence of a source that has gone dark. And in that silence, the last fragments of active trust begin to dissolve, replaced by a very old and very powerful fear. The viewer says source failed. They say it to themselves first, in the private language of their fear. Then they say it in their conversations carefully, in ways that sound practical and grounded. They say they are struggling, that things have not been working, that nothing is coming through. And each time they say it, they are not simply describing a visible condition. They are issuing an inner declaration that cuts deeper into the connection between themselves and the infinite supply that has not moved, has not diminished, and has not failed. Only one thing has happened. A channel changed form. But the mind has called it the death of the source. There is a declaration that can begin to shift this pattern right now. Not a declaration of denial, not a refusal to see the difficulty, but a declaration of accurate identification. A statement that separates the source from the channel and refuses to accuse the infinite because one visible expression changed its form. If you are ready to stop accusing the source when one channel changes, if you are ready to begin separating what is permanent from what is temporary, then type these 3 words in the comment section right now. Supply cannot fail. Let that declaration be the first act of reconnection. Let it go into the space beneath this video as a spoken order, a signal from the receiving end of this teaching that something is shifting in your relationship with the invisible supply. Write it now, not because a comment changes an algorithm, though it may. Write it because the act of writing a truth, of committing to it in a public space, of allowing it to exist outside the silence of your private fear, is itself an act of connection. Supply cannot fail. Write it. Let it be the beginning of a new agreement between you and the source that has not moved, has not withdrawn, and is waiting for the receiver to return to connection. The belief that supply can fail is not a neutral belief. It carries a specific and devastating emotional weight, and that weight does not simply press down on the mind for a moment and then release. It accumulates. It settles into the body, into the language, into the decisions, and into the relationship with the source. The first cost is panic, pure, unmediated panic, the kind that arrives the moment a visible channel closes and the mind, without any anchor in invisible law, has nowhere to stand. Panic is not just an emotion. Panic is a disconnecting force. It reshapes the breath, the vision, and the inner signal that is being sent out into the formless substance. Despair follows panic. Panic is at least energized. It is moving, it is scanning, it is searching. But despair has given up the search. Despair is the emotional state that arrives when panic has exhausted itself and found no visible answer. And despair, from the perspective of invisible supply, is one of the most complete forms of disconnection available to the human mind. A person in despair has, in their inner world, already closed every door and declared the source absent, and the formless substance which responds to the inner condition of the receiver cannot find an opening through despair. Then comes anger at the source. This is one of the least discussed but most common emotional costs of the false belief. When a person has built their trust in God, the universe, or the invisible supply, and then watches visible channels close without receiving a visible replacement, the trust converts into betrayal, and betrayal produces anger. The viewer begins to direct a quiet but powerful rage at the very source they were trying to receive from, not always loudly. Sometimes the anger is disguised as skepticism. Sometimes it sounds like, "I tried that spiritual approach and it did not work." But underneath that skepticism is often an unresolved accusation aimed directly at the source. And that accusation, held inside, is among the most powerful disconnecting forces known. Distrust develops next. Once the anger has settled into the background of the inner life, what replaces active trust is a kind of chronic distrust. The viewer no longer expects the source to provide. They expect to be disappointed. They expect the door to close. They expect the message to be silence. And because the inner expectation is now set to distrust, the mind becomes extremely selective in what it allows itself to see. Channels that are genuinely opening are examined with suspicion. Opportunities that carry unfamiliar form are dismissed before they are explored. And the supply that was always available finds itself received by a mind that has decided in advance that it cannot be trusted. Hoarding arrives in the wake of distrust. When a person truly believes at the level of felt experience, that supply can run out and that source may not replenish it, they begin to grip whatever is left. They count what remains with an anxious precision. They hold tightly to what is still visible and feel profound resistance to any movement that might reduce it further. And this hoarding instinct, entirely understandable from a survival perspective, is yet another form of disconnection from the infinite, because it represents a full retreat into the visible and a complete abandonment of trust in the invisible source behind all channels. Desperation follows hoarding. Desperation is the state of a person who is both gripping the visible and terrified that even the visible will not hold. Desperation produces a very specific quality of action. It is loud action. It is urgent action. It is action taken from a contracted inner state that is broadcasting fear in every direction. And desperate action rarely produces reconnection because the inner signal carried by desperate action is not the signal of a person who trusts the source. It is the signal of a person who believes they are alone, and that belief is reflected back by the formless substance in the form of experiences that confirm the aloneness. Quitting is a form of disconnection that arrives when desperation has failed to produce visible results. The viewer who has exhausted panic, moved through despair, processed anger, settled into distrust, tried hoarding, and lived through desperation may eventually arrive at a complete withdrawal from any active relationship with the source. They stop asking. They stop expecting. They stop imagining a different condition. Not because they are at peace, but because the repeated experience of visible channels closing has convinced them at the deepest level that the supply is simply not available for them. And this is perhaps the most dangerous emotional cost, because from inside the state of having quit, the person cannot even recognize the channels that are still trying to open. Resentment fills the space that quitting leaves behind. Resentment toward others who appear to receive freely. Resentment toward a world that seems to open its channels for everyone except this particular viewer. Resentment toward the teachings themselves, toward the masters, toward the spiritual framework, toward the idea that an invisible supply exists at all. Resentment is the voice of a person who once believed and was, from their perspective, betrayed. And resentment is also a signal, not a sign of weakness, but a sign of a disconnection that has become so complete, so long-standing, so settled into the identity that the person can no longer distinguish between the closed channel and the absent source. Spiritual confusion is the almost inevitable result of all these layers. A person who moved through panic, despair, anger, distrust, hoarding, desperation, quitting, and resentment is not simply discouraged. They are spiritually disoriented. They no longer know what they believe about the source. They no longer know whether the invisible laws they once trusted are real. They are holding two incompatible inner realities at once: the memory of a time when they trusted the source and felt connected, and the present experience of a visible world that seems to confirm the absence of that source. And this confusion, this inability to stand firmly in either the old trust or the new fear, is one of the most painful states a spiritually sincere person can inhabit. And the final cost is the loss of faith itself, not a dramatic rejection, not a public declaration of unbelief, but a quiet, gradual internal withdrawal of the living expectation that the invisible supply will move on your behalf. The faith does not die loudly. It simply becomes quieter and quieter until one day the viewer realizes they have not genuinely expected an answer in a very long time. They may still say the words of faith. They may still use the vocabulary of trust. But beneath the words, the living expectation is gone. And without that living expectation, the connection is as broken as though they had never begun. All of this from a single false belief: that supply can fail. Wallace Wattles did not speak in approximations. He was precise. He said that there is a formless substance from which all things are made, and that this substance fills the universe. He did not say it was large. He said it filled everything. He did not say it was generous toward some people and withheld from others. He said it moved in response to mental impression, to clear thought held with faith and gratitude. And the implication of everything he taught is this: the substance itself does not run out, does not tire, does not withdraw, and does not play favorites. The limitation in any life is never located inside the substance. The limitation is always located inside the relationship between the receiver and the substance. The first thing Wattles wanted you to understand is that the source is not the economy. The visible economic system, with all its cycles, contractions, recessions, and expansions, is a collection of channels through which invisible substance has taken visible form. The economy is the visible expression, not the invisible cause. The economy can contract. It can shift dramatically. It can eliminate entire categories of visible income and employment. And none of that touches the formless substance underneath it, any more than a dry season in one region touches the volume of water held in the atmosphere of the entire planet. The source is not one employer. This must be understood clearly, because the mind under financial pressure is extremely prone to this particular error. When employment ends, the mind calls it the loss of supply. But the employer was never the supply. The employer was a channel through which a certain form of supply was flowing at a particular time. The source that was using that channel to deliver to you has not disappeared because the channel changed form. The source is still present. The source is still formless. The source is still capable of creating a new expression through a different channel, through a combination of channels you cannot currently predict. The source is not one customer. The loss of a major client, which can feel economically catastrophic, is the closing of a channel. It is not the retraction of the source itself. Every person who has ever experienced the loss of a significant client and remained in connection with the source has eventually discovered that the source does not hold its provision in a single container. The substance is formless precisely because it can take any form. It can express through any channel. The departure of one customer is not the departure of the supply. It is the departure of one current expression of the supply. The source is not one bank account. The balance in an account is the current visible measure of a channel that has been flowing. When the balance drops, the mind interprets it as evidence that the source is withdrawing. But the account does not contain the source. The account contains the current visible residue of past channel activity. The source itself is not located in the account. It is located in the formless substance that remains available regardless of what any account currently shows. This distinction is not a comfort phrase. It is a precise spiritual and practical distinction that changes everything about how a person responds to a low balance. The source is creative substance. This is the word that Wattles returned to again and again. Creative. The formless substance is not static. It is not fixed in the channels it has used before. It is actively creative in its capacity to form new expressions, new channels, new paths of delivery. When you remain in connection with a creative source, you are not limited to the channels that have delivered in the past. You are open to entirely new forms of expression that the creative substance can produce in response to your mental impression and your faithful action. The viewer must not reduce the source to the channel. This is not a suggestion. This is a spiritual law. The moment you fully collapse the source into any particular channel, you have committed the fundamental error of the false visible world. You have taken an infinite, formless, creative substance and imprisoned it inside a form. And the moment that form changes, you have nowhere left to stand. The protection against this error is not greater attachment to better channels. The protection is a clear, practiced, regularly renewed understanding of the distinction between the source and any expression of it. Faith reconnects. This too is precise. It is not that faith feels good, though it may. It is not that faith is virtuous, though it expresses virtue. It is that faith, real faith, the living inner expectation that the source is available and moving on your behalf, is the specific mental and spiritual state that maintains the connection between the receiver and the formless substance. Fear disconnects. Faith reconnects. This is the mechanism. Everything that follows in this teaching is the elaboration of this single spiritual law. There is a sentence you may have spoken, either aloud to another person or silently in the language of your own fear. The sentence is, "My supply failed me," or it appears in slightly different forms. The source did not come through. The universe abandoned me. God has not answered. Nothing is working. The invisible law is not operating in my life. These sentences feel like observations. They feel like honest descriptions of a visible condition, but they are not observations. they are accusations. And they are also, in every case, inaccurate accusations aimed at the wrong party. Your supply did not fail you. Your connection may have collapsed under pressure. Your perception may have narrowed under fear. The channel through which supply was flowing may have changed its form. But the supply itself has not failed, because an infinite supply does not have the capacity to fail. You cannot empty an infinite reservoir. You cannot exhaust a formless substance. You cannot deplete what has no bottom. What you can do, and what this teaching is showing you, is disconnect from it. But disconnection is not failure of the source. It is a condition of the receiver. Do not accuse the ocean, because one cup is empty. This image carries the full weight of the teaching in a single sentence. The cup being empty tells you something about the cup, about its position, about whether it is placed to receive, about whether the hand holding it is open or closed. The cup being empty tells you nothing about the level of the ocean. The ocean does not notice the cup. The ocean does not choose to withhold from one particular cup while filling others. The ocean is simply present, vast and available to any vessel that is positioned to receive it. The empty cup is a cup problem, not an ocean problem. Do not call the reservoir dry because one pipe is blocked. A blocked pipe is a serious practical inconvenience. It requires attention. It requires action. It requires an understanding of where the blockage is located and what is causing it. But a blocked pipe is not a dry reservoir. The water that is not flowing through that particular pipe has not disappeared from existence. It is still held in the reservoir, still available, still waiting for a clear path. The intervention required is not to mourn the reservoir as though it were empty. The intervention required is to find the blockage in the pipe or to open a new pipe entirely, while remaining certain that the water itself is present and waiting. The reframe is not denial. This must be stated clearly, because the mind trained by the false visible world will immediately suspect that this teaching is asking it to ignore reality, to pretend that the account balance is different than it is, to close its eyes to genuine financial difficulty. That is not what is being asked. The reframe is not a refusal to look at the visible condition. It is an accurate identification of the cause of that condition. The visible difficulty is real. The closed channel is real. The dropping account is real. What is not real is the conclusion that the visible difficulty represents the failure of the source. That conclusion is an error in identification, and correcting it is not denial. It is precision. The question to ask is not, why has source failed me? The question that will actually move something inside you is this: what is the current state of my connection? Not what has source done or failed to do, but what is the current quality of my inner relationship with the source? Is there fear operating where trust should be standing? Is there panic operating where gratitude should be flowing? Is there accusation operating where faith should be speaking? The honest answer to those questions will tell you far more about your current financial condition than any external analysis of the visible channels. Because the inner condition precedes the outer expression, always. The belief that supply failed is also a protection. This is perhaps the most uncomfortable disruption in this entire teaching. The belief that the source failed you is, in part, a protection against the more frightening possibility that you have played a role in the disconnection. Because if the source failed, then you are the victim, and victims do not have to change. But if the source did not fail, if the connection broke from your side, then the responsibility for reconnection is yours. And that responsibility, while it is genuinely challenging to accept, is also the most powerful piece of news in this entire teaching, because it means you can do something about it. You are not a victim of an absent source. You are a receiver who has lost connection with a source that never moved. And the difference between those two identities is the difference between spiritual paralysis and spiritual action. The victim waits to be rescued by a source that, from inside the disconnection, never comes. The receiver who has lost connection takes the clear, deliberate, spiritually informed steps to restore that connection, knowing that the source is present, available, and will flow through any new channel that the restored connection can open. This is not a comfort teaching. This is a correction teaching. And the correction begins the moment you stop accusing the ocean because your cup has been held in the wrong position. Something is happening in your life that you have been interpreting as the absence of supply. The visible channels have changed. The flow has slowed or stopped. The familiar path has closed. And from inside the experience of that closing, it has felt very much as though the invisible supply itself has withdrawn, as though the source that was supposed to be infinite has chosen to withhold from you specifically, at this specific time, under these specific circumstances. But there is another explanation, a more accurate explanation, an explanation that changes not just how you feel about what is happening, but what you can actually do about it. The explanation is not that supply has failed. The explanation is that a very specific disconnection pattern is operating in your inner life. A pattern that is not random, a pattern that has a precise mechanism, a predictable sequence, and a known set of causes. A pattern that millions of people have fallen into, not because they were weak or faithless, but because they were never taught to distinguish between a changing channel and a failing source, and because they were never taught that distinction, the pattern continued to operate beneath the level of their awareness, quietly shutting down the inner connection even as they prayed, even as they declared faith, even as they worked hard to change their visible circumstances. This pattern has a name in this teaching. It is the disconnection pattern, and it will be revealed in full before this teaching is complete. But it cannot be revealed too early, because the revelation requires the proper foundation. It requires that you first understand how the invisible supply actually works, how connection operates versus disconnection, why the command of faith produces a different result than the calculation of panic, and why the mind itself, however intelligent and sincere, cannot know in advance what form the supply will take next. These are the foundations, and without them, the revelation of the disconnection pattern will land on unprepared ground. Later in this teaching, the exact pattern will be laid open before you. Every step of it, the thoughts that initiate it, the emotions that sustain it, the behaviors that deepen it, and the specific moment at which a person can recognize it operating in their own experience and choose a different response. You will not simply be told that you are disconnected. You will be shown the precise mechanism of the disconnection, down to the level of the specific sentences you have been speaking, the specific rejections you have been performing, and the specific opportunities you may have turned away while believing you were being cautious. All of that is coming. But first, understand this. The pattern that makes infinite supply appear absent is not a sign of spiritual failure. It is a sign of spiritual miseducation. You were taught by experience, by observation, by financial fear, and by a culture that speaks the language of visible limitation, to read the closing of a channel as the withdrawal of the source. That was the primary lesson your environment delivered, and it delivered it repeatedly and convincingly. The correction of that lesson begins in understanding. It deepens in practice. It completes in a new identity. And the full architecture of that correction, including the exposure of every step of the disconnection pattern, is waiting for you in what follows. Remain with this teaching. The open loop has been established. The question is alive inside you now, whether you are fully conscious of it or not. What is the exact pattern that has been making the infinite supply appear absent in my life? That question has an answer. A precise, practical, spiritually grounded answer. It will be delivered. But the teaching must be laid in full for the answer to carry its full weight. Every section that follows is building toward the moment where you will recognize yourself in that pattern and know, perhaps for the first time, exactly what has been happening and exactly what you can do to change it. What is known with certainty right now is this: the supply has not failed. The supply cannot fail. The supply is infinite in nature, creative in capacity, formless in substance, and entirely available to the receiver who knows how to remain in connection with it. What you have been experiencing is not the failure of an infinite source. What you have been experiencing is the felt consequence of a disconnection that has a cause, a mechanism, and a correction. And that correction is what this entire teaching exists to deliver. There is one more thing to hold before the mechanism is revealed. Wallace Wattles taught not only that the substance is infinite, but that it is intelligent, that it does not require you to plan its delivery, that it does not need you to calculate the route, that it moves in ways the human mind, operating in its normal analytical mode, cannot predict, measure, or anticipate in advance. This is not mysticism designed to make you passive. It is a precise teaching about the proper division of responsibility between the human receiver and the infinite source. You are responsible for the what. You are responsible for the inner state of connection. The source is responsible for the how, and the single most common entry point into the disconnection pattern is the moment a person tries to take over the how. Connection to the invisible supply is not passive. It is not a state of sitting quietly and waiting for money to arrive. It is an active inner condition maintained against the constant pressure of visible appearances. And the first component of that active condition is trust. Trust is not merely a feeling. Trust is an inner orientation toward the source that refuses to be fully determined by visible evidence. Trust says, the current visible condition is a current expression of a past inner state, and I am now choosing a different inner state, which will produce a different visible expression in the future. Trust is the ongoing refusal to allow the visible channel to determine the inner relationship with the source. The second component of genuine connection is the clear mental image. Wattles was very specific about this. He did not say to simply desire wealth in a general way. He said to form a clear, precise mental image of the condition you desire, and to hold that image with unwavering clarity. The mental image is the signal sent from the receiver to the formless substance. It is the order placed with the invisible supply, and the quality of that order matters enormously. A fuzzy, contradicted, frequently abandoned mental image produces an inconsistent signal. A clear, held, repeatedly revisited mental image produces a consistent signal, and consistent signals are the ones to which the formless substance responds with consistent movement. Gratitude is not a bonus practice. It is a technical component of connection. Wattles placed gratitude at the center of his teaching for a reason that goes beyond appreciation or positive emotion. He understood that gratitude, genuine gratitude felt in the present for what is already present and for what is coming, is one of the most powerful connection states available to the human mind. Gratitude says, the source is working, supply is moving, and I recognize its movement even in forms that have not yet reached full visibility. And the inner state of gratitude creates an opening in the receiver that fear, by definition, closes. Faithful action is the fourth component of connection. Not frantic action. Not desperate action. Not action taken from the contracted state of a person who believes they must save themselves alone. Faithful action is action taken from the conviction that the source is the supply, and that the human role is to move in alignment with what the source is providing, not to force the source to comply with what the human has determined it must produce. Faithful action steps into the nearest open door. It does not require certainty about the destination before it moves. It requires only the conviction that the source is present and that the next step is available. Openness is the fifth component of connection, and openness is, for many spiritually sincere people, the most difficult component to maintain. Because openness means that you remain willing to receive the supply in forms you did not anticipate, through channels you did not plan, via routes you cannot currently see. Openness requires a flexibility of expectation that feels to the fear-trained mind like a lack of clarity. But it is not a lack of clarity about the what. It is a complete release of rigidity about the how. The clear mental image is held with precision. The delivery method is held with openness. And that combination is the inner state that allows the creative substance to produce new expressions of supply. Receiving is the final component of connection, and it is perhaps the least discussed, because receiving is not simply the passive experience of good things arriving. Receiving is an active inner permission. It is the willingness to allow the supply to arrive in the present moment, through the present channel, in the present form, without demanding that it look different before you accept it. Many people are technically connected to the source, holding the mental image, feeling gratitude, taking faithful action, remaining relatively open, and then at the final step, refusing to receive the supply that has actually arrived because it came in a form that did not match the expected channel. Receiving completes the circuit. Now the mechanism of disconnection. Fear is the primary disconnecting force, not because fear is morally wrong, but because fear is technically incompatible with the inner state of connection. Fear contracts, fear narrows, fear sends a signal to the formless substance that is the precise opposite of the signal sent by trust. Fear says, supply is failing, channels are closing, the source is absent, I must manage this alone through visible means alone. And the formless substance, which responds to mental impression, receives that inner declaration and begins to match it in the visible world. Panic is the acute form of fear, and it disconnects with even greater force. Panic moves fast, produces noise, creates the feeling of action, while actually disrupting the very inner state that produces genuine results. A person in panic is generating enormous mental activity, but that mental activity is not a clear image held with faith. It is a rapid succession of fear images, worst-case calculations, and desperation strategies. And the formless substance is receiving all of it, not just the occasional hopeful thought, but the dominant signal, which in a panicking mind is the signal of a person who believes they are in the middle of the failure of their supply. Contradiction is one of the subtler disconnecting forces, and it operates in ways that the viewer often does not recognize. Contradiction is the state of speaking faith in one moment and speaking fear in the next, of saying in prayer, "The source is my supply," and then saying to a friend an hour later, "Nothing is working, I cannot see any way forward." The formless substance does not filter your inner signal by context. It does not know which statement was the prayer and which was the complaint. It receives the cumulative inner signal, and if that signal is a mixture of trust and fear, faith and accusation, openness and desperation, the signal is contradicted and the supply is expressed in contradicted form, partially arriving and partially not. Channel worship is the specific form of disconnection that this entire teaching is most concerned with. Channel worship is the state of being so attached to one particular form of supply, one particular employer, one particular client, one particular income stream, one particular method of provision, that you cannot allow yourself to receive supply in any other form. The channel worshipper does not consciously believe they are limiting the source. They believe they are being practical. They believe they are focused. But from the perspective of the infinite supply, the channel worshipper is standing in front of a locked door, demanding that supply enter through it, while 100 other doors behind them stand open and are being ignored. Rejected delivery is the form of disconnection that arrives when the supply does come, through a new or unexpected channel, and the receiver, conditioned to expect only one form of supply, refuses to recognize it as supply and turns it away. The rejected delivery may arrive as an unexpected job offer that the viewer dismisses because it does not look like what they imagined. It may arrive as an offer of help from a person the viewer has discounted. It may arrive as an idea that the viewer judges as too small to pursue. It may arrive as a door that the viewer considers the wrong door. In every case, the supply did not fail. The receiver rejected the delivery. Despair is the final form of disconnection worth naming here. Despair is the inner state in which the receiver has not only lost connection, but has actively turned away from the source and stopped believing that reconnection is possible. Despair is the state in which the open loop of fear has closed into a fixed conclusion. The conclusion is, it is over. There is no supply for me. And in the specific technical sense of this teaching, despair is the inner condition that most completely prevents the formless substance from delivering its expression, not because the source has agreed with the conclusion of despair, but because the receiver in despair has no opening through which to receive the delivery that is still being offered. There are two fundamentally different inner postures from which a person can respond to visible financial difficulty. They may look similar from the outside. Both involve activity. Both involve thought. Both involve some form of speech. But from the inside, from the level of the inner signal being sent to the formless substance, they are as different as a clear order and a noise of panic. The first posture is the command. The second is the panic plan. And the difference between them is the difference between connection and disconnection. The command says, supply cannot fail. It does not say this only when the visible evidence supports it. It says this especially when the visible evidence contradicts it. The command is not a statement about the current visible condition. It is a declaration about the nature of the source. It is an inner orientation that refuses to allow the visible channel to determine the inner relationship with the invisible supply. And because the formless substance responds to the inner state of the receiver, the command keeps the channel of connection open, even in the middle of visible difficulty, precisely because it is issued from a place of certainty rather than fear. The panic plan says, "I must save myself alone," not always in those exact words, but always in that emotional register. The panic plan creates the sensation of being responsible for every step of the provision process, for generating the supply, for calculating the route, for forcing the outcome through visible channels alone. The panic plan works very hard. It produces activity that looks from the outside like diligence. But the inner signal driving that activity is the signal of a person who has, at the level of their deepest operating belief, concluded that the source is not available and that they must compensate for that absence with their own frantic effort. The command opens. It opens the receiver to supply arriving in forms that the analytical mind has not yet calculated. It opens the next door before the route is fully mapped. It opens the ear to inner guidance about which direction to move. It opens the eyes to channels that fear has been filtering out. The command does not eliminate the need for action. It changes the quality of the action from desperate to faithful. And faithful action, action taken from a state of inner connection rather than inner panic, carries the signal of a person who trusts the source, and that signal is what the formless substance is designed to receive. The panic plan contracts. It narrows the field of perception to the current visible threat. It focuses the entire energy of the receiver on the one door that has closed, the one account that has dropped, the one channel that has gone quiet. The contracted mind cannot see the open doors because it is staring at the closed one with the full force of its attention. And the formless substance receiving this contracted signal produces a contracted experience, not because the source is punishing the panic, but because the signal being sent out is narrow, and the visible experience that matches a narrow signal is also narrow. The command acts. It takes faithful steps in the direction of the desired condition, not from certainty about the full route, but from trust in the source that knows the route. The person who issues the command and then acts from that command is not passive. They are often more active than the person in panic because their action is directed rather than scattered. They organize their finances calmly. They present their value in the marketplace with composure. They answer the opportunity that arrives in unexpected form. They ask for guidance and then follow it. Their action is not the frantic motion of a drowning person. It is the calm, purposeful movement of someone who knows they are supported. The panic plan scrambles. It produces the exhausting experience of running very hard in multiple directions at once, of applying for things that do not fit, of chasing channels that feel wrong, of speaking to people from a state of visible need that broadcasts desperation in every sentence. The scramble burns energy without creating connection. It generates a great deal of noise without sending a clear signal to the formless substance. And because the signal is noisy, contradicted, and fear-saturated, the visible results are also inconsistent, partial, and often short-lived. The scramble does not solve the problem. It deepens the exhaustion while leaving the inner disconnection exactly where it was. The command sees channels. The person who is operating from the inner posture of the command maintains the perceptual openness to recognize supply arriving in varied forms. They see the new client as a channel of supply, even though it is not the old client. They see the unexpected offer as a channel of supply, even though it did not arrive through the expected route. They see the idea that emerges in quiet reflection as a direction from the source, even though it did not arrive through a formal plan. The command keeps the eyes open to new expressions of the supply because it is not attached to the supply taking any particular form. The panic plan sees threats. Everything that enters the field of perception of a person in panic is evaluated first as a potential threat. The new client looks suspicious. The unexpected offer looks too good to be true. The idea that emerges in quiet reflection gets immediately rejected by the analytical mind as unrealistic or impractical. The panic plan cannot receive supply in new forms because it is using all of its perceptual capacity to scan the environment for confirmation of the danger it already believes it is in. And the confirmation it seeks is exactly what it finds, because the mind that is looking for evidence of threat is a mind that will locate threat in every available piece of information. The command trusts the source. This is the central difference, not a peripheral difference, not a stylistic difference in approach. The fundamental difference between the command and the panic plan is the relationship with the source that each one reflects and reinforces. The command is the expression of a person who knows, at the level of functional faith rather than mere intellectual agreement, that the source is available, that the supply is infinite, and that the current visible difficulty is a channel condition, not a source condition. And from that knowing, everything that follows is different. The panic plan worships appearances. It takes the visible condition as the final authority on what is possible. It reads the dropping account as the verdict of the source. It reads the closed door as the judgment of the universe. It reads the silence of the channel as the withdrawal of the invisible supply. And in worshipping these appearances, in granting them the authority of ultimate truth, the panic plan does the one thing that completes the disconnection most thoroughly. It makes the visible condition, which is only ever a temporary expression of a past inner state, into the permanent definition of what is available. If this teaching is moving something inside you, if the distinction between the command and the panic plan is beginning to land in a way that feels less like information and more like recognition, then this channel exists to carry that recognition further. The Master's legacy exists to preserve the teachings of Wallace Wattles, James Allen, Florence Scovel Shinn, and the other interpreters of invisible law who gave their lives to understanding how the formless substance moves through human lives. Every teaching on this channel is built on the same foundation as this one. The laws of mind, source, invisible supply, and inner transformation are not concepts for the spiritually curious. They are the practical architecture of a life lived in genuine connection with infinite supply. Subscribe to the Master's legacy now, not simply because more teachings are coming, though they are. Subscribe because each teaching on this channel is designed to reveal one more layer of the disconnection pattern, one more precise understanding of how the invisible law operates, and one more practical protocol for returning to connection when the visible world is pressing hardest against your faith. The channel is not entertainment, it is restoration. And if the supply cannot fail, then the teachings that reveal how to remain connected to it are among the most important things available to you right now. There is a specific frustration that spiritually sincere people carry when they are taught to trust the source for supply. It is the frustration of not knowing how, not knowing through which channel the next provision will come, not knowing in what form, not knowing when. And the analytical mind, trained by years of visible world logic, treats this not knowing as a problem to be solved, as a gap in the plan that must be filled before trust can be genuine. But Wattles taught something that directly addresses this frustration. The mind is not designed to calculate the how. The source is designed to determine the how. The division of responsibility is not equal. It is specific. The mind calls supply absent when it cannot predict the next form. This is not a character flaw. It is a training deficiency. The mind has been trained by every visible world institution that has shaped it to equate knowing the route with having supply. If you can see the path, supply is there. If you cannot see the path, supply is gone. But the invisible law operates by a different logic entirely. The next form of supply may be something the mind has never experienced before. It may arrive through a channel the mind has never used. It may require a type of action the mind has never taken, and the fact that the mind cannot currently predict it is not evidence of its absence. It is simply evidence that the source is creative. The source is not absent because the next form has not arrived. Say that again internally. The source is not absent because the next form has not arrived. The absence of a visible expression in the present moment tells you nothing about the state of the invisible supply. The supply is not located in any particular expression of it. The supply is located in the formless substance itself, which is present at all times, which does not take breaks, which does not have capacity limits, and which is not waiting for the analytical mind to approve its delivery method before it proceeds. What the mind must release is not the desire for supply. What the mind must release is the assumption that it can know in advance through which door the supply will enter. The clear image is yours to hold. The faithful expectation is yours to maintain. The grateful openness is yours to practice. But the specific route, the specific timing, the specific form, the specific channel through which the formless substance will express your next delivery, that is not the mind's territory. That belongs to the source. And the attempt by the analytical mind to manage that territory is not wisdom. It is the specific form of interference that most consistently delays delivery. This release is not passivity. It is the most active spiritual act available to the receiver. Because releasing the how requires continuous faith. It requires catching the mind every time it insists on knowing the route before it will trust the source. It requires speaking the command in the face of the mind's demand for calculation. It requires taking the nearest open door even when the mind cannot see where that door leads. The release of the how is not the abandonment of discernment. It is the proper placement of discernment, which is in the hands of a source that sees every possible channel simultaneously, while the human mind can see at most a handful. Imagine a power grid, a vast, functioning, fully operational power grid that serves an entire city. The grid is active. It carries current. It has been generating and distributing power consistently, reliably, without interruption. The capacity of the grid is not in question. The engineers who maintain it have confirmed that it is performing exactly as designed. The power is there. The supply of electricity is not the issue. And yet, in one apartment in that city, every lamp is dark. The resident of that apartment is sitting in the darkness. They have been sitting in it for some time now. They have looked at the dark room and drawn a conclusion that is entirely reasonable from the perspective of someone who has never been shown the grid. The conclusion is, there is no power. The supply of electricity has failed. The current has stopped. The system that was supposed to illuminate this apartment has withdrawn its service, and here in this darkness is the proof. But the darkness is not the proof of grid failure. The darkness is the proof of a disconnected cord. This is the teaching. The source is the grid. The visible channels, the jobs, the clients, the accounts, the opportunities are the lamps. And the inner state of the receiver, the trust, the gratitude, the faithful action, the openness to receive is the cord. The grid has not failed. The grid is functioning. The power is there. But the cord that connects the lamp to the grid is disconnected. And a disconnected lamp does not tell you anything true about the state of the grid. It tells you only that the connection has been broken. The grid does not notice that the lamp is dark. The grid does not withhold its power in response to the lamp's accusation. The grid does not reduce its output because the lamp is struggling. The grid simply carries the power it was designed to carry, constantly, reliably, regardless of the condition of any particular lamp. And the same is true of the source. The formless substance does not reduce itself in response to your fear. It does not punish your panic by withdrawing supply. It simply remains what it is, infinite, available, creative, and entirely indifferent to the darkness you are experiencing while the cord is out. Fear disconnects. This is the first specific cord-pulling action. When fear enters the inner life in response to a visible channel closing, it does not simply add an emotion to an otherwise stable inner state. Fear actively pulls the cord. The inner contraction that fear produces closes the opening through which supply flows. The signal that fear sends to the formless substance is the signal of a closed receiver, and a closed receiver, however sincere, cannot receive what the grid is constantly offering. The lamp can be made of the finest materials. It can be positioned in the perfect place, but if fear has pulled the cord from the socket, the lamp remains dark regardless of the quality of the grid. Gratitude reconnects. The act of genuine gratitude, the felt recognition of what has already been given, what is present in the current moment, and what the source is already expressing in the life of the receiver, is not merely a pleasant inner state. It is a specific act of reconnection. Gratitude takes the cord and returns it to the socket. It does this by restoring the inner orientation of the receiver from closed to open, from contracted to expanded, from a signal of fear to a signal of trust. And the moment that cord returns to the socket, the grid, which has been functioning without interruption the entire time, begins to flow again through the lamp. Faith reconnects. Not the statement of faith spoken over a contradicting inner state, but genuine faith, the living expectation that the source is active and moving on your behalf right now, is the sustained act of keeping the cord in the socket. It is not a single act of reconnection. It is the ongoing practice of maintaining connection against the pressure of visible appearances that would pull the cord again. Faith is the one who holds the cord steady when the visible world produces another bill, another closed door, another delayed message. Faith does not look at the dark room and say, "The grid has failed." Faith says, "The cord was disconnected and I am returning it now." Action reconnects. This may seem counterintuitive. Action is a physical thing. Connection seems like an inner thing. But Wattles was very clear that faithful action is part of the connection mechanism. Action is the cord plugging itself back in, not desperately, not frantically, but with the calm confidence of a person who knows that the grid is active and that the lamp is about to come back on. When you take a step toward the desire from a place of trust rather than panic, when you organize, create, offer, answer, or ask from the inner state of a connected receiver rather than a desperate one, that action is itself an act of reconnection. It closes the circuit. Receiving reconnects. The final act of keeping the cord in place is the willingness to let the light come on. This sounds simple, but for many people who have been sitting in darkness for a long time, the return of the light can feel unfamiliar, even suspicious. The lamp that has been dark for months may find it difficult to simply allow the light to return when the cord is reconnected, not because anything is wrong with the grid, but because the inner expectation has been set to darkness. Receiving requires resetting that expectation. It requires allowing the supply to arrive in the form it arrives in, through the channel it arrives through, at the timing the source has determined, without demanding that it arrive differently before you accept it. The light returns when the connection returns, not eventually, not after a waiting period, not after enough punishment has been endured for the past disconnection. The light returns when the connection returns because the grid has been there the entire time. The power has never failed. The supply has been constant. What changed was the cord. And when the cord is reconnected, the supply that was always present becomes the light that was missing. This is the entire teaching compressed into one image. The supply cannot fail. The cord can be disconnected, and the cord can always be reconnected. There are specific actions, specific inner postures, and specific spoken words that function as the act of pulling the cord from the socket. And they are worth naming precisely because they operate so frequently in the lives of spiritually sincere people that they have become invisible through repetition. The first is saying that the source failed. This is not merely a description of a feeling, it is an active interference. When you speak the sentence either internally or externally, "The source failed me," you are sending a signal that is the precise opposite of the connection signal, and the formless substance, which responds to the dominant inner signal of the receiver, receives that declaration as the current operating state of the connection. Declaring that nothing works is the second interference. This declaration often sounds practical. It sounds like a sober assessment of visible conditions. But it is not a sober assessment. It is a generalization made from specific visible evidence and applied to the entire invisible supply. Nothing is working does not mean this particular channel has not yet produced results. It means supply itself has stopped. And that declaration, repeated, reinforced, spoken to others, and confirmed with each new visible disappointment, deepens the disconnection with every repetition. Rejecting channels is the third interference. When a supply arrives through an unfamiliar route and the receiver, conditioned to receive through a specific channel, dismisses it, the cord is pulled at the moment of rejection. The new client who approaches through an unexpected method is not a distraction from supply. They are a delivery of supply. The old contact who reappears with an unusual offer is not irrelevant. They are a channel that the source has chosen to use. Every rejection of an unexpected channel is a moment at which the receiver chooses the darkness of the familiar over the light of the available. Hoarding in panic is the fourth interference. When fear drives the receiver to grip whatever visible supply remains and refuse to allow any movement of it, the inner state of contraction that underlies hoarding sends a very specific signal. The supply is scarce. And the formless substance receiving that signal begins to match it in the visible experience. This does not mean that practical stewardship of visible resources is wrong. It means that the inner state of gripping in fear, of protecting the last visible drop while declaring the reservoir empty, is a form of disconnection that prevents the next delivery from finding an opening. Speaking lack is the fifth interference. Every sentence spoken from the inner state of lack is an order placed with the formless substance for more lack. Not because the universe is punishing the speaker, but because the inner state from which lack speech emerges is the signal that the formless substance receives and then expresses. Speaking lack means speaking sentences such as, "I never have enough," "Money always leaves me," "Nothing comes through for me," "My supply has dried up." These are not neutral observations, they are active orders, and the formless substance processes them as the current operating command. Abandoning action is the sixth interference. The person who, in the face of visible difficulty, stops taking any faithful action and simply waits for supply to arrive without movement is also pulling the cord. Not because the source requires visible effort before it will deliver, but because faithful action is part of the connection mechanism. It is the cord in the socket. When action stops, one component of the connection circuit is removed and the flow is interrupted. Not forever, but until the receiver returns to the faithful, trust-driven, source-oriented action that completes the inner connection and allows the visible expression to follow. Refusing help is the seventh interference, and it is perhaps the most counterintuitive on this list. Many spiritually sincere people have been taught by pride, by independence, or by a misunderstanding of self-reliance that receiving help from other people somehow diminishes their faith in the source. But the source uses people as channels. A person who arrives in your life carrying the very thing you need is not an interference with divine supply. They are divine supply in action. Refusing their help because it does not match the expected form of the delivery is a rejection of the delivery itself. Obsessing over one door is the eighth interference. When all of the receiver's attention, prayer, expectation, and emotional investment are focused on one specific channel, the mind has effectively told the formless substance that this is the only acceptable delivery method. And the creative substance, which was ready to deliver through any of a dozen channels, finds itself staring at a receiver who has their eyes fixed on a single point and who will not look anywhere else. The obsession over one door does not open that door through the force of attention. It closes the perception to every other door that has already been opened. There is a freedom available on the other side of releasing the how. It is not a passive freedom. It is not the freedom of a person who has given up caring. It is the freedom of a person who has made a precise and principled decision to carry the what with full clarity while releasing the tracking of the delivery to the one who knows all available routes. And this freedom changes the quality of daily experience in ways that compound over time until the inner life of the receiver is genuinely transformed. The supply is not fragile. This must be absorbed, not merely understood, absorbed. Felt at the level where decisions are made, where sentences are constructed, where inner interpretations of visible events take their shape. The supply is not fragile. It does not bend under the pressure of the economy. It does not crack under the weight of your fear. It does not diminish when a channel closes or a bill arrives or a silence extends longer than you expected. The supply is not fragile. Only the connection can be fragile, and the connection can be restored. Your state may shake, but the source does not. This distinction is enormous in practical spiritual life. Your inner state may be genuinely shaken by visible events. That shaking is not a spiritual failure. It is a human response to a visible world that is designed to produce that shaking. The question is not whether you will be shaken. The question is whether, when the shaking happens, you will accuse the source of having moved, or whether you will recognize that it was your state that moved and returned to connection. The freedom is in knowing that the source is steady, even when you are not. And that steadiness is always there to return to. Return to connection before you interpret the delay. This is a practical instruction for the moment of financial pressure that deserves to be carried as a standing protocol. Before you draw any conclusion about a delayed provision, a silent channel, or a door that has not opened, return to connection. Restore the inner state of trust before you attempt any interpretation of the visible condition. Because the interpretation you make from inside a connected state will be accurate, the interpretation you make from inside a disconnected state will simply confirm the disconnection. The freedom of releasing the package tracking is the freedom of being able to live in the present moment of trust while the delivery is in transit. Every person who has ever ordered something and then checked the tracking information compulsively every hour knows that the tracking does not move the package. It only intensifies the waiting. The package is en route, or it is not. But the watching of it does not change its location. And in the same way, the constant anxious scanning of the visible world for evidence that supply is or is not coming does not speed the delivery. It only intensifies the disconnection by keeping the inner state in a constant condition of fear-tinged watching. The supply will arrive, not necessarily in the form you have assigned to it, not necessarily through the channel you have been watching, not necessarily on the schedule your analytical mind has calculated as the latest acceptable delivery window, but it will arrive. Because an infinite, creative, formless source that has not failed and cannot fail is actively moving toward every receiver who maintains the inner state of connection. The freedom is not in knowing exactly when, the freedom is in knowing the source. And knowing the source is the foundation of everything in this teaching. The viewer who internalizes this freedom will find that the daily experience of financial life begins to shift in quality before it shifts in visible numbers. The quality shifts first. The anxiety reduces. The breath deepens. The perception opens. The outer ear begins to hear guidance that the panicking mind was too loud to receive. And in that quieter, more connected inner state, the visible channels that the source was always preparing begin to become perceptible, not because the source just now created them, but because the receiver has finally returned to a state from which they can be seen. There is nothing required to begin this return except the decision to make it. Not a perfect inner state, not complete freedom from fear, not years of spiritual practice already behind you. Nothing except the decision, made now in this moment, to separate the source from the changing channels and to speak the first word of reconnection. The supply cannot fail. Say it. Not as performance, not as spiritual optimism, but as the most precise and accurate statement you can make about the nature of the invisible substance that underlies your entire visible life. The supply cannot fail. And the one who knows that, who holds it, who returns to it in every moment of shaking, is the one through whom the supply finds its next expression. The first step of the practical protocol is to define the what with precision, not to plan the how, not to calculate the route, not to determine in advance which channel will carry the supply, only to define the condition desired with clarity, to hold that definition steadily, and to make it the central image that the inner life is organized around. Wattles was precise about this. The clear mental image is the order. The formless substance responds to the clarity of the order, not to the complexity of the plan that surrounds it. Define the what, hold the what, and release everything else to the source. Begin with a connection statement, not a wish, not a hope, not a maybe. A statement that anchors the inner life in the truth about the source. The statement is this: the source is my supply. Channels may change, but supply cannot fail. Speak it, write it, return to it. Not because repetition creates magic, but because repetition creates a settled inner conviction. And settled inner conviction is the foundation from which all faithful action is taken. The connection statement is the inner ground you stand on, while the visible world shifts around you. Now ask yourself the first question that defines the what. What condition do I genuinely desire? Not the channel through which you expect it to arrive. The condition. More financial ease. The freedom to move without anxiety. A growing relationship with creative work and income. the ability to give generously, the experience of supply flowing consistently. Define the condition in positive, present, clear terms, not "I want to escape poverty." That is defining the absence of what you do not want. Define the presence of what you do desire, and define it specifically enough that the inner image is clear and the signal is precise. Ask yourself the second question that defines the what. What channel am I currently mistaking for the source? This is the question that, for many viewers, will produce an uncomfortable moment of recognition, because the answer is almost always a specific thing, a specific employer, a specific client, a specific account, a specific income stream, a specific platform, a specific relationship that has been, up until now, identified in the inner life as the source of provision rather than a channel of provision. Name it, not with resentment, not with guilt, but with the precision of someone who is beginning to separate the source from the channel for the first time. Ask yourself the third question. Where have I accused the supply? Where in your recent inner life, in your recent conversations, in your recent prayers, have you directed the energy of accusation toward the source, toward God, toward the universe, toward the invisible law? Where have you spoken sentences that declared the supply failed, that nothing is coming, that the source has not answered? Not to create shame, but to create awareness. Because accusation is a specific form of disconnection, and you cannot correct a pattern you have not first clearly seen. Ask yourself the fourth question. What connection practice restores me? You are not identical to every other receiver. Your particular path back to connection has a specific quality. For some people, the return to connection comes most powerfully through spoken declarations made in silence and solitude. For others, it comes through a few minutes of genuine gratitude, specifically naming what is already present. For others, it comes through a single faithful action taken in the direction of the desired condition. For others, it comes through reading a single page of a master's teaching and allowing it to reset the inner orientation. Know your return path, because you will need it, not once, many times. The what is not a passive definition, it is an active inner instruction. Every time you return to the clear mental image of the desired condition, you are reissuing the order to the formless substance. You are not waiting for the order to be processed once and then delivered on a timeline you have calculated. You are maintaining the order as the living, present, dominant signal of your inner life. And the inner life, held consistently in the image of the desired condition, saturated with the connection statement, regularly restored to gratitude and trust, is the most precise and powerful spiritual mechanism for engaging the creative response of the infinite supply. Do not confuse the clarity of the what with the certainty of the how. These are two entirely different things, and they are frequently collapsed together by a mind that insists on knowing the root before it will hold the image. You can define the condition with complete precision while remaining entirely open about the form the delivery will take. You can know exactly what you are receiving while having no idea which channel will carry it. In fact, this combination of clear what and open how is the most powerful receiving posture available, because it allows the formless substance to use any available expression while the clear image directs the supply with precision. The definition of the what is also a form of respect for the source. When you define clearly what you desire and hold that image consistently, you are communicating to the formless substance with precision. You are not asking vaguely for things to somehow improve. You are not placing a general order for something better. You are making a precise inner statement about the condition you are aligned with, the condition you are trusting the source to express, the condition you are holding the inner space for. That precision is not arrogance, it is cooperation. It is the human side of the divine collaboration that Wattles described as the certain way. Return to the what daily. Not with anxiety, not with the checking energy of the person tracking the package. Return to the what with the calm certainty of someone who has placed a clear order with an infinite and reliable source, and who is simply maintaining the alignment between their inner state and the desired condition while the supply takes the form it will take. This is the posture of a receiver who knows, not who guesses, not who hopes, not who fears, but who knows. And that knowing held consistently is what this entire teaching is building toward. Once the what is defined, the second step of the practical protocol is the deliberate, practiced, ongoing release of the how. This release is not a single act. It is a discipline. The analytical mind will return to the how repeatedly because it has been trained to manage the root as though the root were the responsibility of the receiver. Every time it returns, the practice of release is required again. Not with frustration, not with self-criticism, with the patient firmness of a person who knows that the source handles the how and who is committed to maintaining that proper division of responsibility. The first practice of releasing the how is this statement: "This channel is not my source." Say it directly to the channel that fear is currently gripping. Say it to the employer. Say it to the client. Say it to the account. Say it to the platform. Not with dismissal, not with ingratitude for the channel's past service, but with the precision of a person who is making a clear inner correction. This channel is not my source. The source uses channels. It is not located in them. This statement, spoken regularly in the inner life, begins to dissolve the false equation that identifies the channel with the source, and in doing so, it begins to restore the freedom of open receiving. The second practice is to bless the changing channel. When a channel shifts, closes, reduces, or disappears, the instinct of fear is to grip it, mourn it, or accuse it. The practice of reconnection is to bless it, to acknowledge that it served its purpose as a channel of supply for the time that it served, and to release it without bitterness. Blessing the changing channel is not weakness. It is the precise spiritual action that keeps the receiver from being emotionally anchored to a closed door while open doors are present elsewhere. The blessing releases the grip, and released grip restores openness to new channels. The third practice is to return to the source statement. After addressing the specific changing channel, return the inner life to its anchor. The source is my supply. Channels may change, but supply cannot fail. Return to it not as a discipline of denial, but as a discipline of accurate identification. The source statement is the truth about the invisible reality behind all visible channels. It is the fact that the analytical mind keeps forgetting under pressure, and that the practice of return keeps reinstating. Every return to the source statement is a return of the cord to the socket. Every return is a micro-act of reconnection. The fourth practice is to take one faithful action. After releasing the specific channel and returning to the source statement, identify the single nearest open door and take one step through it. Not the door you have been waiting for, not the door you plan to go through. The nearest currently open door, even if it is small, even if it is unfamiliar, even if the mind cannot yet see where it leads. One faithful action. One step. Taken from the inner state of trust rather than the inner state of panic. This action is not the action of a person who is forcing the supply. It is the action of a person who is expressing trust in the source by moving in the direction the source has made available. The fifth practice is to remain open. Having released the specific channel, returned to the source statement, and taken the faithful action, the remaining posture is openness. Not passive waiting, but active inner openness. The kind of openness that does not close the door on an unexpected form of supply. The kind of openness that does not dismiss the unusual offer, the unfamiliar contact, the new direction, or the small beginning. Openness is the inner state that allows the creative substance to use all available channels rather than the single channel the fearful mind has approved. The how will not look like what the analytical mind calculated. This can be difficult to hold when visible pressure is high. The mind wants the route to look familiar. It wants the channel to be recognizable. It wants the delivery to come through the door it is watching. And sometimes it does. But often, especially when the analytical mind has been gripping the how so tightly that the familiar channel has closed under the pressure, the source will use an entirely different expression, an expression that could not have been predicted, that does not fit any previous category of experience, that arrives from a direction the mind never considered. The release of the how is what creates the space for that expression to arrive. Release the timeline as well. This is an extension of releasing the how. The when is as much a part of the how as the form or the channel. The analytical mind, under financial pressure, sets a deadline. The supply must arrive by a specific date, through a specific channel, in a specific amount. And when the date passes without the predicted delivery, the mind calls it confirmation of failure. But the source does not operate on the timetable constructed by fear. The source operates on the timetable constructed by the readiness of the receiver, the availability of all relevant channels, and the creative process of the formless substance bringing a new expression into visible form. Releasing the when is not passivity. It is the most advanced form of trust. There is a specific statement that can anchor the release of the how in daily practice. It is this: I hold the vision and release the method. I hold the vision and release the method. Repeat it. Hold it. Allow it to become the inner instruction that corrects the mind every time it insists on tracking the package, every time it calculates a new worry about the delivery route, every time it starts building a panic plan. I hold the vision and release the method. This is not a passive instruction, it is the active division of responsibility between the receiver and the source. And maintained over days and weeks, it begins to reshape the inner relationship with the how into the proper posture of a connected receiver. The release of the how is also, ultimately, an act of worship. Not in a purely religious sense, but in the deepest sense of acknowledging the superiority of the source over the planning of the human mind. It is the recognition that the formless substance can see every available channel in every dimension of your life simultaneously, while you can see perhaps 3 or 4. It is the recognition that the creative capacity of the source exceeds the creative capacity of your analytical mind by a factor that cannot be calculated. Releasing the how to the source is not giving up control. It is placing control in the hands of the one who can actually exercise it with full information. One of the most powerful inner postures the connected receiver can adopt is the expectation of surprise. Not the anxious expectation of the unexpected, but the calm, faith-informed anticipation that the source, because it is creative and infinite and not limited to the channels already known, will likely deliver the supply through a form that was not predicted. This expectation of surprise is not naivety. It is the logical extension of the belief that the source is creative. A creative source will not always use the same channel. A creative source will use the channel that is most available, most effective, and most aligned with the full scope of the receiver's life, which it can see far more completely than the receiver can. The supply may return through a different client, someone the receiver has never worked with, someone who arrives through an entirely new referral path, or through a piece of work created without any expectation of that particular response. The new client is not a lesser supply than the old client. The new client is the same infinite supply wearing a different channel. And the receiver who has prepared themselves to expect surprise will not dismiss this client because they do not match the template of what provision has previously looked like. They will receive them as the new expression of the same infinite source. A new offer may arrive, an opportunity that was not present before because the creative substance, responding to the clear mental image and the connected inner state, has produced a channel that did not previously exist. The new offer may require new thinking, it may require new skills, it may require stepping into a form of value creation that the receiver has not previously considered. The expectation of surprise means holding the inner posture that is open to this new offer rather than suspicious of it, not recklessly, not without discernment, but open. Open to the possibility that the source is more creative than the limit of what the receiver's previous experience has deemed possible. A changed idea may emerge, an inner direction, a shift in understanding, a new angle on the existing work, a restructured offering. Ideas are channels. The creative substance moves through the mind as well as through the visible world. When the inner state of the receiver is connected rather than contracted, the ideas that arise from that inner state carry a different quality than the ideas generated by panic and desperation. Connected ideas often carry a calm certainty, a sense of rightness, a feeling of alignment with something larger than the plan that the analytical mind was constructing. The expectation of surprise includes the expectation that inner guidance will arrive in the form of an idea worth acting on. Unexpected help will come. Expect it. A person who has information, a connection, a resource, or a kind of assistance that is exactly what the current situation requires may arrive from a completely unexpected direction. Not because the receiver has figured out how to attract help through a visible strategy, but because the creative source, seeing the full landscape of the receiver's life, can arrange for channels to cross in ways that the receiver's isolated view of their own situation cannot predict. The expectation of surprise includes the expectation of human channels that arrive in unexpected form, better timing than the receiver calculated. The supply that was supposed to arrive in the month of most visible pressure may actually arrive in the following month, when something else in the receiver's life has shifted to create the proper context for it. The timing of the source is not the timing of the analytical mind, and the receiver who has released the timeline along with the route will find that what initially felt like a late delivery was actually a perfectly timed expression of a supply that was always moving. Better timing than calculated is not disappointment. It is a revelation about the scope of the source's view. A new platform, a new avenue, a new medium, a new way of offering value may become available. The visible world is constantly generating new channels through which the formless substance can move. The receiver who is fixated on the channels of the past cannot see the new channels of the present because they are looking backward. The expectation of surprise turns the inner eye forward, toward the new expressions of the old supply, toward the channels that the creative substance is preparing to use because the familiar channels have closed and the source, as always, has already identified the next route. The inner guidance that has been waiting for the noise of panic to reduce will finally become audible when the inner state of connection is restored. This is perhaps the most personal form of supply. Not an external channel, but an internal one. The voice that says, go here, try this, speak to that person, write that thing, make that offer, take that step. The inner guidance is not external channel. It is the formless substance speaking through the deepest layer of the receiver's own consciousness, and it has been speaking continuously. But panic and fear and the noise of desperate calculation have been drowning it out. The expectation of surprise includes the expectation that the inner voice, now audible in the restored connection, will direct the next step with a clarity that the analytical mind alone could not have produced. Action is the expression of trust. This is a precise statement, not action as a method of forcing supply through a visible channel, not action as a substitute for faith, as though working harder compensates for the absence of inner connection. Action as the outward expression of an inner state that trusts the source and knows the supply is available. This kind of action has a different quality than desperate action. It is calmer. It is more purposeful. It is more responsive to what is actually available in the present moment, rather than being driven by a panic about what is not yet visible. The first action available to the reconnecting receiver is to stop panic speech. This is not a small action. The moment you stop speaking lack, accusation, and fear into the space of your daily conversation, the inner signal changes, not instantly in its full power, but the direction changes. The current of the inner life begins to move differently when the mouth stops issuing fear orders. Stop saying nothing is working. Stop saying I cannot see any way. Stop saying the source has not answered. Replace these sentences not with forced positivity, but with accurate spiritual statements. The source has not failed. I am returning to connection. Channels may change, but supply cannot fail. Organize your finances calmly, not from panic, not with the gripping energy of someone who believes the last of the visible supply is about to run out. With the calm, grounded, practical attention of a person who is taking proper care of the visible channels that are still open while trusting the source to provide the next expression. Calm financial organization is a form of faithful action. It says, I take responsibility for what is mine to manage while trusting the source for what is the source's to create. And this combination, practical stewardship plus inner trust, is the full expression of the certain way. Answer the opportunity when it arrives. When the new offer appears, when the unexpected message comes, when the door that was not on the plan suddenly opens, answer it. Answer it with the openness of a receiver who expected supply to arrive through channels they could not predict. Answer it before the analytical mind has built a complete case for why it cannot possibly be the right channel. Answer it with appropriate discernment, of course. But answer it from a foundation of trust, not from a foundation of fear and suspicion. The nearest open door deserves the respect of being walked through rather than analyzed from a distance until it closes. Make the offer. Whatever value the receiver has to give, whether it is a skill, a service, a product, a creative work, or a form of attention and care, make the offer. Do not wait for certainty before presenting it. Do not wait for the inner confidence that only arrives after the action is taken. Make the offer from the current level of trust available, knowing that the act of offering is itself a faithful action that sends a signal to the formless substance about the inner state of the receiver. The person who makes offers is not forcing supply. They are expressing supply through the available channel of their own value, and the source can deliver through that channel when the offer is made. Ask for guidance, not as a passive act of waiting for direction before moving. As an active part of the faithful posture of the connected receiver, ask the source for the next step. Ask for clarity about the nearest open door. Ask for the wisdom to recognize the unexpected channel when it arrives. Ask for the inner certainty that will carry the spoken command past the fear of visible contradiction. Ask not from desperation, but from the cooperative posture of a receiver who knows the source is present and that the guidance is available. And then listen, not with the anxious ear of the tracker, but with the calm attentiveness of the connected. Accept help when it is offered. The person who brings help is a channel of supply. Receiving that help gracefully, without the pride that refuses assistance or the false independence that insists on managing alone, is a form of reconnection. It says to the source, I am open. I am not attached to supply arriving only through my own unaided effort. I recognize the channels you are using, and I receive through them. Accepting help is not weakness. In the language of this teaching, it is the completion of a circuit. It is the lamp accepting the current that the grid has been sending through a human channel. Create value actively, not in the frantic energy of desperation, but in the steady, purposeful, connected energy of someone who knows that the act of creating value is one of the primary ways the receiver cooperates with the formless substance. Value creation is the human side of the supply mechanism. The source provides the creative substance. The receiver provides the directed, faithful action that shapes that substance into something the visible world can use. When you create value from a connected inner state, you are not trying to force the supply. You are inviting it to move through the open channel of your own creative capacity, and the invitation, issued with faith, is always received. Panic feels like safety. This is the most important thing to understand about it. Panic does not feel like the enemy of connection. It feels like the responsible response. It feels like taking the situation seriously. It feels like being the kind of person who does not simply sit passively while their visible channels are closing. Panic says, I am doing something about this. And that sensation of doing something, however disconnecting it actually is, creates the illusion that the panic is protective. The danger is not that panic feels dangerous, the danger is that panic feels safe. Panic checks repeatedly. The checking behavior, reviewing the account balance multiple times a day, repeatedly assessing the status of a pending opportunity, constantly scanning for evidence that something has changed, produces a feeling of active management that substitutes for genuine connection. The repeated checking does not change the account balance. It does not accelerate the opportunity. It does not open a closed channel or restore a broken connection. But it creates the sensation of activity, and that sensation of activity keeps the person in panic from recognizing how thoroughly the panic itself is disconnecting them from the supply they are so anxiously checking for. Panic hoards. And the hoarding that panic produces is not only financial. The person in panic hoards attention, energy, time, goodwill, creative output, and generosity. Every resource that might flow outward and create the conditions for supply to arrive through new channels is pulled inward and held tight. The hoarder in panic is experiencing the inner truth of what they believe, that supply is scarce, and that every outward movement reduces what little remains. And because they are living from that belief, The formless substance is organizing the visible experience to confirm it. The scarcity that feels like the cause of the hoarding is actually being reinforced by the hoarding. Panic rejects. When an opportunity arrives that does not match the specific form that the panic plan has determined is the correct delivery method, panic rejects it. Not from discernment, from contraction. Panic says, this is not the right channel, this is not the right amount, this is not the right timing, this is not the right person. And each rejection, delivered from the contracted inner state of panic, is a delivery return to sender. The supply that arrived through that unexpected channel has been refused, and the refusal is recorded, not in any ledger of punishment, but in the pattern of the receiver's own experience, which continues to reflect back the contracted inner state. Panic accuses. It accuses the source. It accuses the universe. It accuses the teaching itself for having promised a supply that has not appeared. And accusation is the verbal form of pulling the cord from the socket. Every sentence of accusation sends a signal to the formless substance that the inner state of the receiver is in opposition to the source, is measuring the source by visible evidence, and finding it wanting, is holding the source accountable for the disconnection that the receiver's own panic has created. The accusation does not change the source. It only deepens the inner condition that makes the supply appear absent. Panic stops gratitude. And because gratitude is one of the specific reconnecting actions that keeps the cord in the socket, the stopping of gratitude removes a critical component of the connection circuit. The person in panic cannot feel genuine gratitude because gratitude requires the inner orientation of a receiver who sees provision as real and present and moving, while panic sees provision as absent and threatened and potentially never coming. Gratitude and panic cannot occupy the same inner space at the same moment. Every moment of panic is a moment in which gratitude has been displaced. And gratitude can only return when the panic is seen for what it is, not a safety mechanism, but a disconnection mechanism. Panic stops creativity. The creative faculty, which is the receiver's primary tool for cooperating with the formless substance, requires the inner state of a connected, open, trust-filled mind to function at its full capacity. Panic narrows the creative aperture to the point where only threat responses can pass through it. The person in panic cannot create value with their full capacity because all of their creative energy has been redirected toward managing the fear. The ideas that might have opened a new channel of supply cannot form because the mind that would form them is entirely occupied with the noise of the panic plan. Panic makes supply appear gone. This is the final and most complete consequence of the false safety trap. The panic that was supposed to protect the receiver from the loss of supply is actually the primary mechanism by which the supply appears to withdraw. The panic does not drive supply away in some metaphysical act of punishment. The panic creates an inner state that is incompatible with receiving, and an inner state incompatible with receiving cannot receive. The supply that is constantly available cannot find an opening through a receiver who is fully contracted in panic. And so from inside the panic, the supply looks gone. The grid is dark. The reservoir appears empty. But the fault is not in the grid. It is in the panic that pulled the cord. The invisible supply attempts to deliver to the receiver in every period of genuine need. This is not a comfort statement. It is a structural claim about how the formless substance operates. The creative source is always moving toward the receiver who holds the desire. It is always seeking channels. It is always preparing expressions. And some of those expressions arrive at the door of the receiver and are turned away, not because they are wrong, but because they do not match the form the receiver decided supply must take. Rejected delivery is one of the most costly forms of disconnection, precisely because it occurs after the supply has already begun moving. The small opportunity is rejected first. The receiver who is waiting for a large and dramatic provision consistently dismisses the small opportunity as insufficient. But small opportunities are often the first expression of a supply that is beginning to move, the initial channel through which the formless substance is making contact, the testing of a new route. The small opportunity rejected does not simply disappear. It closes that specific channel. And the receiver who makes a habit of rejecting small opportunities will find over time that the supply appears to never move, when in fact it has been arriving in small forms that were consistently refused. Help is refused. The person who arrives with genuine assistance, who offers a connection, a resource, a referral, a piece of information, or simply the kind of presence that opens a new possibility, is a channel of supply. When the receiver's pride, or their preference for a specific form of delivery, leads them to refuse that help, they are closing a channel that the source was actively using. The refusal may feel principled. It may feel like maintaining appropriate independence. But from the perspective of the invisible mechanism, it is a rejection of a delivery that the source had arranged, and the consequences are felt in the continuation of the very condition the help would have addressed. The new path is dismissed. When visible circumstances change in ways that could be pointing toward a different direction, the receiver who is attached to the old path dismisses the new one before exploring it. The person who has been employed in one industry and suddenly finds opportunities opening in a related but different field may look at those opportunities through the lens of loss as a departure from the expected channel rather than through the lens of supply as a new channel opening. The dismissal of a new path is often made in the language of loyalty to the old one, but it is functionally a rejection of the delivery vehicle that the source has sent. The idea is ignored. When inner guidance produces a specific direction and the analytical mind overrides it with a calculation of risk or a judgment of scale, the supply that could have moved through the action taken on that idea is blocked. Ideas that come from the inner state of connection carry the energy of the source's creative movement. When they are ignored in favor of the louder, more insistent, more fear-saturated thoughts of the panic plan, the channel of inner guidance closes gradually until it becomes very quiet. And the receiver who has silenced inner guidance loses one of the most direct channels through which the supply moves. The person is mistrusted. A new contact who arrives at the edge of the receiver's life, carrying potential and possibility, may be dismissed because they do not fit the expected profile of the kind of person who delivers supply. The old colleague who comes back with a new proposal, the unexpected acquaintance who mentions an opportunity, the stranger who opens a conversation that the receiver's fear-trained social judgment immediately evaluates as irrelevant. Every person mistrusted based on appearance, history, or the profile of what help is supposed to look like is a potential channel deliberately closed by the receiver. The door is judged too humble. This is one of the most specific forms of rejected delivery. The door that opens is real and available. The supply it offers is genuine, but it is small, it is quiet. It does not announce itself with the drama that the receiver's imagination has assigned to the coming provision. And the receiver, looking at this humble door through the expectation of a grand arrival, dismisses it. The humble door closes. And the receiver continues waiting for the grand one, which the source may have been preparing to express through the sequence that began with the humble door. The timing is resented. When supply arrives outside the window the receiver constructed, it is often received not with gratitude, but with resentment. The provision that arrives 1 month after the deadline the fear mindset is met with, it is too late. The opportunity that comes after significant difficulty has been endured is met with, why did it not come sooner? And resentment, directed at the timing of a provision, is a form of refusing the provision itself. It receives the supply with a closed hand rather than an open one, and the quality of the receiving determines whether the channel opens further or begins to close again. There is a specific language of fear that functions as a direct disconnection command. It is the language of the sentences that the disconnecting mind speaks most fluently, most repeatedly, and most convincingly. And because these sentences feel like honest descriptions of reality, rather than inner commands to the formless substance, they are rarely questioned. They are simply spoken, reinforced, and lived out in the visible experience that their speaking helps create. The first sentence of fear is this: the source failed me, spoken inside, felt as a verdict, settled as a belief, and operating as a full disconnection command. The second sentence is, nothing is coming. Nothing is coming says that the supply has stopped moving in the direction of the receiver. It closes the inner expectation, and closed inner expectation is a closed receiving posture. The formless substance approaches a receiver whose inner posture says nothing is coming and finds no opening through which to deliver. The nothing is coming sentence creates the experience it describes, not through mystical punishment, but through the simple mechanics of the inner state closing what the expectation had opened. The third and fourth sentences arrive together. I am alone, and this is over. These are among the most complete disconnection commands available to the human inner life. I am alone severs the felt relationship with the source. This is over declares the end of any possibility of connection being restored. Together, they create an inner condition in which the receiver has essentially informed the formless substance that the relationship is terminated. And from inside that inner condition, no supply can be seen, expected, or received, not because it has stopped being available, but because the receiver has severed the perception of connection. The fifth sentence is, I cannot recover, and the sixth is, there is no supply. These are the deepest layers of the fear signal, not simply fear about a current condition, but declarations about the fundamental capacity of the receiver and the fundamental availability of the supply. I cannot recover is an identity sentence. It defines the receiver as someone for whom recovery is not possible. There is no supply is a theological sentence. It defines the source as absent or insufficient. Both of these, spoken into the inner life, are orders of enormous power, far more powerful than the casual intentions of the person who speaks them out of momentary despair. The correction is precise. The source has not failed. I return to connection. Say it directly in the face of the fear signal, not after the fear has been fully processed and overcome, in the middle of it. At the moment when the fear sentence is forming in the mouth or the inner dialogue, interrupt it, replace it, not with a denial of the visible difficulty, but with an accurate identification of the invisible truth. The source has not failed. I return to connection. This is not positive thinking. This is spiritual precision, and the practice of catching the fear signal and replacing it with the reconnection statement is the fundamental daily practice of the receiver who is returning to the certain way. The correction practice begins with a single act, catching the accusation before it settles. This requires a degree of inner attentiveness that only develops through practice. The accusation is often so fast, so fluent, so familiar, that it passes through the inner dialogue without being noticed as an accusation. The first discipline is simply to slow the inner dialogue enough to hear the sentences being spoken inside, and to ask, honestly and without judgment, whether those sentences are connection statements or disconnection commands. Catching the accusation is not self-punishment. It is the beginning of self-awareness, in the one area where awareness creates the greatest change. After catching the accusation, the second step is to separate the source from the channel in the specific accusation that was caught. The accusation always collapses them. It says the job left, therefore the source has failed. It says the client did not pay, therefore the invisible supply is absent. The correction is to insert the precise distinction back into the sentence, the job left. That is a channel shifting. The source has not moved. The client did not pay. That is one channel being temporarily blocked. The source is still available. This separation, performed on the specific sentence of accusation, is the microsurgery of reconnection. It does not deny the visible fact. It accurately identifies the invisible truth. The third step is to speak reconnection, out loud if possible, in the internal voice if not. Speak the connection statement. Speak the accurate identification. Speak the sentence that the formless substance needs to receive as the new operating signal from this receiver. The source has not failed. Channels may change, but supply cannot fail. I am a connected receiver. The supply is moving. I return to trust. Speak it with conviction, not with performance, not with forced emotion. With the quiet, firm conviction of a person who is making a choice about which signal they are going to send to the formless substance, regardless of what the visible world is currently showing. The fourth step is to give thanks before proof arrives, not after the visible channel has opened and the supply has become measurable. Before. Give thanks in the present tense, from the present inner state, for a supply that is moving even when it is not yet visible. Not with the strained gratitude of someone who is trying to manufacture a feeling they do not yet have. With the chosen, deliberate, principled decision to orient the inner life toward gratitude as an act of faith, before proof arrives. This is the giving of thanks that Wattles described as one of the most powerful components of connection with the formless substance. The fifth step is to take one calm action. From the corrected inner state, from the place of reconnection, identify the nearest open door and take one step through it. One action, calm, trust-driven, not driven by the panic that the correction practice temporarily quieted, driven by the conviction that the source is present, that the supply is available, and that the human role is to move in the direction that the nearest open door represents. This single action, taken from a reconnected inner state after the correction practice, carries a different quality of signal than the actions taken from panic, and that different quality creates a different visible result. The sixth step is to watch for new channels. Having corrected the accusation, separated the source from the channel, spoken reconnection, given thanks before proof, and taken the one calm action, the final practice is to watch with the open expectation of the receiver who knows that the creative source is working. Not to watch anxiously, not to track the package, but to maintain the perceptual openness that recognizes supply when it arrives in an unexpected form. The correction practice does not end with a single round. It is a living practice, applied again and again, every time the fear signal returns, every time the accusation forms, every time the inner state contracts. And each application deepens the new pattern. Each correction builds the new identity. There is an identity available on the other side of this correction, not the identity of a person who never feels fear about visible channels closing, not the identity of a person who never notices the dropping account or the silent message, but the identity of a person who, when those things occur, does not collapse the source into the channel and does not accuse the infinite supply of failing because one expression of it has changed form. The new identity is this: I am a connected receiver. I receive from an infinite source. Channels may come and go, but the supply that flows through them is constant, creative, and available to me through new expressions when familiar ones shift. The statement that anchors this identity is the one that has been built throughout this entire teaching: supply cannot fail. Not as a wish, not as a spiritual hope, as the accurate description of the nature of the formless substance from which all visible supply is drawn. Supply cannot fail. The source is infinite. The creative capacity of the formless substance exceeds every limitation that the visible world can present. And I, as a receiver who has been taught the difference between a changing channel and a failing source, no longer confuse the two. I do not accuse the ocean because one cup is empty. I do not call the reservoir dry because one pipe is blocked. The second anchor of the new identity is this: I return quickly to connection. Not that disconnection never happens, not that fear never arises, but that the time between disconnection and reconnection grows shorter with each practice of the correction. The identity of the connected receiver is not the identity of someone who never loses the cord. It is the identity of someone who knows how to return to the socket, who knows the correction practice, who knows the distinction between source and channel, and who uses that knowledge the moment the disconnection is noticed. I return quickly to connection. The third anchor of the new identity separates the final confusion. I do not confuse channel changes with source failure. This is the core correction in identity form, not a temporary adjustment in thinking, a permanent restructuring of how the inner life interprets visible events. When a channel changes from this point forward, the new identity does not file it under source failure. It files it under channel shifting. And from that accurate filing, the response is not panic and accusation. It is the correction practice, the source statement, the released how, the expectation of surprise, and the nearest open door. The new identity changes the filing, and changed filing changes everything. The new financial identity is not built in one day. It is built in the daily practice of the correction, the daily return to the source statement, the daily release of the how, the daily action from trust rather than panic. It is built each time the accusation is caught before it settles. Each time the channel is blessed and released rather than grieved and gripped. Each time a small opportunity is received rather than dismissed. Each time inner guidance is followed rather than overridden. The identity is the sum of these practices, applied consistently in the face of the visible world's persistent pressure to return to the old identification. 6. And from inside the new identity, the visible life begins to reflect the new inner state, not instantly, not according to any schedule the analytical mind can predict, but because the inner state precedes the outer expression, because the signal sent to the formless substance determines the visible response, because the receiver who is genuinely, consistently, faithfully connected to the infinite supply is the receiver through whom the supply finds its most complete and consistent expression. The visible life begins to change. Channels open that were not visible before. Supply arrives in forms that the old identity would have dismissed or rejected. And the new identity, confirmed by these new expressions, becomes more settled, more natural, more true. Everything that has been taught in this teaching rests on one foundation. The supply is infinite. Wallace Wattles was not speaking in optimistic metaphors when he described a formless substance that fills the universe and responds to mental impression. He was describing a precise spiritual mechanism, a mechanism that does not know scarcity, a mechanism that does not reduce itself when visible channels change form, a mechanism that is available to every receiver who maintains the inner state of connection. The supply is infinite. That is the foundation. Every other teaching in this script is built on it. On top of that foundation sits this truth: channels change. They always have. They always will. The job that provided for 10 years changes. The client that anchored the business moves on. The platform that generated income shifts its rules. The economy that supported one industry restructures around another. Channels change. This is not failure of the source. This is the nature of the visible world, which is always a current, temporary expression of the invisible. Channels change, and the receiver who knows this is not destabilized by it. They recognize it as the ordinary movement of visible forms, and they look to the source, not the channel, for their fundamental security. Fear disconnects. This was the central mechanism revealed throughout this teaching. Not fear as a moral failing, fear as a technical disconnecting force. Fear contracts the inner state, sends the disconnection signal to the formless substance, closes the perceptual field that would otherwise recognize new channels, produces panic behavior that deepens the disconnection, and ultimately makes an infinite supply appear absent by preventing the receiver from being in the inner state that allows supply to arrive. Fear disconnects. This is the mechanism. And knowing the mechanism is the beginning of the ability to intervene in it. Gratitude reconnects. Faith reconnects. Action reconnects. Receiving reconnects. These 4 practices, applied in the daily life of the receiver who has understood the mechanism, form the operational architecture of the restored connection. Gratitude in the present tense, before proof. Faith as the living inner expectation rather than the intellectual agreement. Action taken from trust rather than panic, through the nearest open door rather than the predetermined route. And receiving, the active inner permission to allow the supply to arrive in the form it arrives in without demanding that it look different before it is accepted. These 4 practices keep the cord in the socket. Action expresses trust. This was the teaching of the certain way, and it bears repeating in the recap because it is the teaching most easily lost when the overview is simplified. The release of the how does not mean the abandonment of action. It means the transformation of the quality of action from desperate forcing to faithful expressing. The receiver who has released the how still acts. They organize, they offer, they create, they answer, they ask, they move through the nearest open door, but they do so from the inner state of a person who trusts the source, and that inner state transforms the quality of the action, the signal it sends to the formless substance, and the visible results it produces over time. Receiving completes connection. The final teaching, the one that closes the circuit, is that connection is not complete until the supply is actually received. The cord in the socket does not illuminate the lamp unless the lamp is willing to accept the current. Receiving is the lamp accepting the current. And receiving requires the three qualities that this teaching has attempted to build into the inner life of the viewer: openness to the unexpected form, gratitude for the supply as it arrives, and the active permission to allow what is being delivered to land completely, rather than being partially accepted with one hand and pushed back with the other. If you have traveled through the length of this teaching, through the pain mirror of closed doors and silent accounts, through the exposure of the false visible world and the mechanism of disconnection, through the master's law and the invisible mechanism and the concrete analogy and the practical protocol and the hidden sabotage, and arrived here, something has already shifted. Not perfectly, not finally, but the direction has changed. The understanding has deepened. The distinction between the source and the channel is now clearer inside you than it was when this teaching began. And that clarity is not a small thing. That clarity is the beginning of the restored connection. You may have been deeply disconnected before this teaching found you. The disconnection may have been long-standing. The accusation may have settled into something that felt like settled truth rather than a temporary inner condition. The fear may have become so familiar that you called it realism. The panic plan may have become so habitual that you called it diligence. And from inside that settled disconnection, the supply has appeared absent for a long time. Not because it was absent, because the cord was out of the socket and the darkness of the room felt like confirmation of an empty grid. The source has not vanished. This is the most important sentence of this entire teaching, and it is being placed here near the end, because this is the moment when the viewer most needs to hear it with full weight, not at the beginning, when the teaching was still being built. Now, here. After the mechanism has been explained and the pattern has been revealed and the correction practice has been taught, the source has not vanished. It has been present the entire time. It has been available. It has been creative. It has been sending new channels and preparing new expressions and arranging new deliveries. The source has not vanished. What is being offered to you right now is not the promise of instant visible change. What is being offered is the knowledge of the return path. The path from accusation back to trust, from channel worship back to source orientation, from panic back to command, from rejected delivery back to open receiving. The path is real. It is practical. It is based on the precise spiritual laws that Wallace Wattles spent his life understanding and teaching. And it is available to you right now, not in some future condition of readiness, but in the present moment, in the inner state you choose to move into from this point forward. Every time you have said the source failed me, you were not lying. You were reporting your genuine experience of the disconnection, but you were wrong about the cause. The source did not fail. The connection broke, and the difference between those two diagnoses is enormous in practical terms, because if the source failed, you are helpless. But if the connection broke, you can restore it. And you can restore it now, with the correction practice, with the source statement, with the released how and the expected surprise and the nearest open door. You can restore it now. The invisible supply is waiting. It has not moved. It has not gone to someone else. It has not decided that your particular situation is beyond its creative capacity. The formless substance that Wattles described, the infinite creative substance that fills the universe and responds to the mental impression of the connected receiver, is present right now in your life, available right now through channels that are already forming, already moving, already preparing to become visible in your experience the moment your inner state of connection is restored. The supply is waiting. Return to it. The cord is in your hand. For 7 days, beginning today, beginning now, there is a practice that will do more to restore the inner state of connection than any amount of planning, calculating, or forcing through visible channels. Every morning before the visible world has made its first claim on your attention, and every evening, before the day's accumulation of visible evidence has settled into the inner life as verdict, speak this sentence aloud. The source has not failed. I return to connection, not silently, aloud, in the voice of a person who is making a declaration to themselves and to the formless substance simultaneously. 7 days, morning and evening. 14 declarations. After speaking the declaration, take one action from trust, not a large action, not the action that requires the full route to be visible. One action, the nearest open door, whatever it is in your current visible life. Answer the unanswered message. Make the one offer that has been forming in the back of the mind. Organize one area of the financial picture with calm rather than panic. Speak to one person who represents a potential channel. Create one thing that expresses value. One action, taken from the inner state that the declaration restores. 14 declarations and 14 faithful actions. This is the 7-day challenge. On the 3rd day, the mind will likely resist. It will return to the accusation, to the calculation of why the declaration is not yet producing visible results, to the tracking of the package. When it does, do not judge it. Return to the declaration. The source has not failed. I return to connection, then take the next calm action. On the 5th day, something will likely shift, not necessarily in the visible account or the visible channel. In the inner state, a quality of ease may arrive that was not present before, a perception may open. An idea may come from the quieter inner space that the practice is creating. On the 7th day, the declaration may feel less like a discipline and more like a truth that has been reinstated. The 7-day challenge is not a magic formula. It is a practice of return. And the power of the practice is not in its ritual quality, but in its function. It interrupts the accusation pattern at the beginning and end of every day. It re-anchors the inner life in the truth about the source. It expresses trust through one daily faithful action, and it builds, day by day, the settled conviction of a receiver who knows that the supply cannot fail. After 7 days, the challenge does not end. It becomes the foundation of a new daily practice that will continue to restore and deepen the connection for as long as it is maintained. If this teaching has moved something in you, if the distinction between source and channel has landed with the weight of recognition, if the correction practice has given you a path back to connection that you did not have before this began, then there is one action to take right now in this space. Write your reconnection phrase in the comment section below. Write, "Supply cannot fail." Or write the declaration from the 7-day challenge, "The source has not failed. I return to connection." Write it, not for the benefit of the algorithm, though it may serve that purpose. Write it as your spoken order. Write it as the signal you are sending from the receiving end of this teaching, outward into the formless substance, declaring the direction your inner life is choosing from this moment forward. This channel, the Master's Legacy, exists because these teachings are not historical curiosities. They are living laws, the principles that Wallace Wattles revealed about the formless substance and the certain way are operating right now in the life of every person who reads this. The laws of mind, source, invisible supply, and inner transformation do not require historical context. They require a receiver who understands them, and this channel is committed to revealing them, one teaching at a time, with the precision, the calm authority, and the spiritual depth that the masters themselves brought to them. Share this teaching with someone who is sitting in the darkness of a visible difficulty and has concluded that the grid has failed, when in truth the cord has only been disconnected. The teaching that changes the inner diagnosis from source failure to receiver disconnection is the teaching that opens the return path. And the return path changes everything, not in an instant, not without the discipline of the practice, but with the certainty of a spiritual law that does not have exceptions, only applications. Share this because someone near you is about to accept the verdict of an empty cup and needs to be reminded that the ocean has not changed. Subscribe to this channel if you have not already done so. The teachings of Wallace Wattles, James Allen, Florence Scovel Shinn, and the other interpreters of invisible law are being drawn forward into the specific language of the present moment, the present fear, the present financial pressure, and the present spiritual question of people who are sincere in their desire to live connected to an infinite source. Every teaching on this channel is building one structure, the inner architecture of a receiver who knows the law, practices the return, and refuses to accuse the source when a channel changes form. Return to this teaching. Not once. Return to it the next time a channel closes and the accusation begins to form. Return to the section that speaks to the specific fear you are feeling in that specific moment. Let the teaching be a living document in your spiritual practice rather than a single experience, because the law it reveals does not change with repetition. It deepens. The 10th return to the teaching will land differently than the first, because the 10th return is happening inside a receiver who has been practicing the correction and building the new identity with every previous application of the law. And now the circle closes. This teaching began with a statement about the nature of the supply. It began where it will end. The invisible supply cannot run out. It has no bottom. It has no ceiling. It is not governed by the economy, or by the decisions of one employer, or by the silence of one channel, or by the fear of one receiver. It is infinite. It is creative. It is formless. It is available. And it has been present every single moment that it appeared to be absent. The darkness in the room was not the absence of power. It was the disconnected cord. And the cord is in your hand. The supply cannot fail. Return to it, and let the next channel appear.